on fiscal year's 2025 budget request for the Department of Transportation. In February, I had the chance to welcome you, Secretary, to Hawaii, where we visited Lahaina on Maui to get an update on the recovery after the fires. What was clear then, as it is now, is that those survivors need help. A whole town was flattened. Thousands of people are left without homes overnight, and 9 months later, their lives are still in limbo. And I know you know this, Mr. Secretary, and I want to appreciate your attendance, your presence on Maui, on Oahu, but also your ability to listen to the needs of the survivors. And I'll just make it very simple. The survivors need transitional housing. The survivors need transitional housing. Other communities across the state are dealing with disasters of their own. Not far from here, Baltimore is recovering from the tragic collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. And as I reiterated to Governor Moore and the Maryland congressional delegation this week, we're going to get Baltimore whatever it needs to rebuild. Elsewhere, just this past weekend, a freight train derailment on the Arizona-New Mexico border forced resident evacuations and a highway closure. We are still waiting to find out more about what caused the accident, but we're thankful that nobody was hurt. And it's a reminder of just how important the investments we make in transportation safety are. In response to last year's East Palestine derailment, this committee, along with Senator Sherrod Brown, worked on a bipartisan basis to improve rail safety by investing in research and technologies to prevent such accidents. More needs to be done to hold the industry accountable, and the administration is requesting an additional $26 million to do just that. In aviation, this committee is focused on addressing the shortage of air traffic controllers in order to maintain safety and reliability for flyers nationwide. The FAA's request for 2,000 new air traffic controllers is urgent and necessary. This committee has also provided significant increases in staffing and resources for aircraft certification, which has helped the Office of Aviation Safety to add more than 600 new staff to improve the scrutiny of aircraft manufacturers, including and maybe especially Boeing. An additional $30 million is being requested in this budget for 26 positions, enhanced workforce training, data management, and improvement to safety reporting systems. On road safety, I'm glad to see that NHTSA has finally issued a rule mandating automatic emergency brakes, which will save many, many lives. But more needs to be done. 40,000 lives are lost every year because of roadway accidents, and a growing share of these are pedestrian and bike deaths. No one, whether you drive or bike or walk, should feel in danger trying to get around in their community. We need real accountability here to better understand why the department's investments and regulations are not yet producing safer outcomes. And finally, we have to look at equity in our transportation networks, particularly for rural and tribal communities. This budget proposal to eliminate the cost share for rural and tribal transit programs is a step in the right direction. But we need to continue to expand access for these communities to DOT's competitive programs. Equity also means looking at who pays for and benefits from our transportation networks. And so I'd like to hear about the administration's proposal to increase taxes on certain business jets and the extent to which these jets are currently being subsidized by other aviation users. The budget requests before us reflect urgent and important national transportation priorities, and these investments will benefit millions of Americans across the country for generations to come. And with that, I'll turn it over to my friend and the Vice Chair, Senator Hyde-Smith, for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I certainly appreciate that introduction and the working relationship we have. Welcome. Thank you for being here. I just want to talk a little bit about where we are, and while we're all frustrated how long it took to get the FY24 appropriations packages through Congress signed into law, I will note that here in the Senate, we passed the T-HUD appropriations bill last November with strong bipartisan support with the help of Senator Collins, for sure, and Senator Murray. Oh, and by Senator Kennedy, no doubt. But without the leadership and the vision of Vice Chairman Collins and Chairwoman Murray, you know, we may well have been here saddled with continuing CRs through the end of the fiscal year, which benefits no one and eliminates Congress's ability to carry out its most fundamental duties. But thank you for being here to testify again on the budget request for the Department of Transportation, which has such a direct impact on so many people in every state. But when you appeared before the subcommittee last year, the department was contending with serious safety challenges, such as the failure of the FAA notice-to-air missions system and the devastating derailment, as the chairman mentioned, in Ohio. Today, the department is grappling with two new emergencies involving Boeing and then the collapse of the Baltimore's Francis Scott Key Bridge. I look forward to hearing how the department is confronting each of these obstacles and prioritizing the safety of the traveling public. And as Congress contemplates how to address emergency funding needs resulting from the Baltimore Bridge collapse and other disasters, we as appropriators must not lose sight of our responsibility to provide adequate annual funding for critical programs across the department. The administration's FY25 request for the Department of Transportation totals $108.9 billion, which represents a roughly $2.6 billion increase above the FY24 enacted levels. I'm once again disappointed to see that even with the proposed increase in overall funding, the request woefully underfunds or in some cases eliminates entirely programs that are priorities for this subcommittee. For example, last year the President's budget request includes $510 million for the popular Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvements Grant Program, but this year the funding request has been slashed by more than half to just $250 million. Additionally, the pandemic underscored the importance of a robust, resilient, and reliable American port system. So it is difficult for me to understand why the administration's FY25 funding request for the Vital Port Infrastructure Development Program is shockingly 66% less than the FY24 request, reduced from $230 million to just $80 million. While the administration may cite the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act funding for these programs as a counter to my concerns, we must recognize that the funding provided in that legislation is not perpetual. It's not finite and it's not perpetual. The practice of backfilling annual appropriations with the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act funding is simply not sustainable, and the administration has not laid out a transition plan for funding critical programs in a post-Infrastructure Investment Job Act's environment. The Infrastructure Investment Job Act's off-ramp strategy is necessary to formulate a funding that strikes a balance to meet the needs of all Americans, especially those in rural communities, which face unique transportation challenges. Without such a strategy, under-resourced rural areas like those across Mississippi would be put at risk. This subcommittee's commitment to addressing rural needs is epitomized by the $250 million Rural Bridge Bundling Program that was established in the FY24 THUD bill, directing resources to sparsely populated areas for much-needed bridge repair and rehabilitation work. Our rural communities often benefit from the RAISE grant program, so I wanted to flag some of my concerns with how the administration is proposing to fund and administer these grants. I appreciate that the administration seeks to provide $800 million for the national infrastructure investments, which encompasses RAISE and mega grants, but I'm troubled by its plan to combine these two distinct programs without clearly explaining how much funding will be allocated under each of those programs. I have also concerns about the proposal to use the TIFA funds to cover the full $800 million cost. I was pleased, however, to see that the budget request includes additional funding for the FAA to hire more air traffic controllers to manage the increased traffic in our national airspace system, and to bring on more critical safety staff to help address the FAA's ongoing aircraft certification reform and oversight efforts. I also support the administration's intentions to continue fully funding the Essential Air Service Program. The Essential Air Service Program connects our nation's rural communities to the broader transportation network and benefits more modest airports like those found in Greenville, Tupelo, and Hattiesburg, Mississippi, by ensuring safe travel for customers traveling to and from the smaller markets. New businesses rarely locate in areas without dependable commercial air service, so supporting these rural airports is vital for the future economic development in these areas. To conclude, I believe that our funding decisions should be informed by fiscal responsibility and made with the American taxpayer in mind. Mr. Secretary, I look forward to hearing from you and working together in the American people to ensure that we have the safest, most reliable transportation network in the entire world. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Mr. Secretary, please proceed with your testimony.
How about now? There we go. Chair Schatz, Ranking Member Hyde-Smith, Vice Chair Collins, and members of the subcommittee, I want to thank you for the opportunity to discuss President Biden's fiscal year 2025 budget request for the Department of Transportation. And I want to thank you for your partnership as we have delivered safer, stronger transportation across every mode and across the country. Roadway fatalities are at last trending downwards, shipping costs are down as supply chains are running more smoothly, and airline cancellations last year were the lowest in a decade. As you all know, we still have much more to do. We are rebuilding not just from the pandemic, but from decades of disinvestment and an enforcement environment that for too long privileged corporations instead of protecting people. The President's budget request of $146.2 billion builds on the progress we have made and enables us to deliver on the important challenges and opportunities that remain. I'll start with our primary mission across every mode of transportation, safety. On our roads, we have funded projects in every state to improve safety for all travelers. After years going in the wrong direction, we've now had 7 consecutive quarters of declining deaths on America's roadways. But this is still a national crisis taking over 40,000 lives every year, and we are requesting $72 billion to improve America's roads and bridges with an emphasis on safety and efficiency. We're constantly reminded of the importance of transportation safety. The country watched in shock as a cargo ship struck and destroyed the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore, taking 6 lives and closing a vital port. We are working across the Biden administration and with state, local, and private sector partners to help reopen the port as quickly as possible. We also immediately got to work with the state on the first steps toward rebuilding the bridge. Turning to aviation, America was rightly alarmed when a door blew out of an Alaska Airlines flight in January. The FAA acted swiftly by grounding 737 MAX 9 aircraft until each plane was safe to return to the air. And the FAA is significantly increasing oversight of Boeing. The agency is also investing in the physical infrastructure, staffing, and technology of our national airspace and airports. We are requesting $26.8 billion for the FAA, which will support oversight of aircraft production, accelerate the modernization of the national airspace system, increase the target to hire 2,000 air traffic controllers, and continue improving airports. On our rails, we are modernizing infrastructure, fixing road rail crossings, and improving service in places like Chicago, Moore, Oklahoma, between New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut, just to name a few. We are requesting $16.4 billion, which, in addition to expanding and improving rail service, will allow us to increase the number of safety inspectors to 400 and add new staff to complete safety audits. We recently finalized the rule for safe train crew sizes, establishing what most Americans assumed was already the case, which was a minimum of 2 crew members generally applying to large freight trains. Indeed, we are taking every step that does not require an act of Congress. But we're also continuing to call on Congress to pass the Bipartisan Railway Safety Act, which would provide much-needed authorities to keep passengers, workers, and communities safe. Across the country, we are repairing and replacing what existed and building and modernizing for the future. Last week, I was in Las Vegas for the groundbreaking of the new rail line from Southern California to Las Vegas, which will be the first true high-speed rail to go into service in the United States. It was a great day for the millions of Americans who will ride this train every year, for our truck drivers and supply chains that will benefit from less congested highways, for everyone across the country who will live in a climate with 800 million fewer pounds of carbon pollution annually. But more than those separate benefits, it's a celebration of the fact that America can still build massive engineering marvels with the potential of many more to come. This one project is creating 1,000 good union jobs for the men and women who will maintain and operate the train line, plus another 10,000 good union construction jobs to build it. Everywhere I go, I meet workers already benefiting from these jobs. And I think often of workers like a young veteran I met in Washington State who reminded me of so many people I got to know when I was in uniform, who go on to face the challenges of building a civilian life. He talked about what it was like coming off active duty as a Marine. And then he said, I came across, these are his words, I came across this union, the amount of training I got, the amount of work stability, the level I have to conduct myself at, the purpose that I have, prevented me from becoming a statistic, end quote. He's now the first person in his family to own a house. We know what it means to have these kinds of jobs, and these benefits are multiplied across tens of thousands of projects, improving American transportation across the country and the millions of jobs they support, helping us build stronger supply chains, get cleaner air, and deliver safer, more affordable ways for every American to get where they need to go. We've made good progress, but there is much more to do, and we look forward to working with this committee to continue delivering for every community in this country. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here, and I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Secretary. I'll start with tribal transportation. As you know, over the last several years, we've significantly increased funding for tribal transportation. Currently, there are 157,000 miles of roads listed on the National Tribal Transportation Facility Inventory. 60% of them are unpaved. 60% of 150,000 miles of roads are unpaved. How successful have tribes been in accessing DOT's competitive grant awards in comparison to state departments of transportation? And if the answer is not as successful as they ought to have been, what are we doing about it?
Well, thank you for the question, and likewise, I have found it extraordinary how much tribes are asked to do with how little in terms of the resources that are sometimes available to them. And so we have sought to make sure that there is equitable and supported access to our competitive grant programs. And I've been pleased to note that many of our recent award announcements have included successful applications by tribal applicants. Most recently, a Protect grant in South Dakota that was among the largest in that round. We also recognize that often tribal governments don't have the same resources that many well-off cities or states or other communities might, which is why we have dedicated tribal infrastructure at the DOT. FTA's Tribal Transit Program includes $46 million in competitive funding over 5 years, which we're requesting an increase of nearly 83% over the previous we got 83% over the previous authorization. We also, through the IIJA, now have at the Assistant Secretary level an Office of Tribal Affairs, helping to facilitate our relationships in Indian country. Candidly, I think there's a long way to go to make sure that Indian country and tribal applicants are getting all of the transportation support that they need. And we will continue working with all of the mechanisms we have at the US DOT, as well as engaging the Department of Interior and other players to make sure we're working together in every way we can.
Thank you. The one comment I'd offer is that it just is hard to apply. And I think that's something that maybe the department can do something about. If you are the kind of tribe that has just a few hundred members, but lots of lane miles, you're very likely not in a position to assemble a team to do the kind of application that the State Department of Transportation, for instance, would be able to do. Let's talk about air traffic controller staffing. There's a little bit of a balance that you have to strike here because they're tired, right? Air traffic controller fatigue is not just a morale question or a sort of union versus management question, it's a safety question. And Senator Shaheen has really been a leader on this. I think the challenge is as we try, and some of the recommendations are to give these folks more rest, and yet we are short air traffic controllers. So what's the problem in hiring? How's the throughput going? I know you think, you know, this is, I don't mean this as a backhanded compliment, but you think like a consultant. So I know you've thought about the kind of systems aspect of this problem, and I'm wondering if you can tell us the theory of change here.
Thank you. The bottom line is we need more controllers, and we're acting to make that a reality. And the budget reflects that. It would enable us to further increase the hiring targets, so fiscal '25 would be 2,000 new controllers, up from 1,800 this year, up from 1,500 the last year. That puts us ahead of attrition, but not by much, which is why we're trying to really accelerate that and get the resources to continue the controller hiring and training surge. We've also been working to make sure that we expand the pipeline. You mentioned throughput. This is part of why the FAA is working with colleges and universities in the Air Traffic Collegiate Training Initiative, or ATCTI, to supplement the capabilities that we have with our academy. Bottom line is, of course, we have to and will maintain a very high standard for what it takes to become a controller, but we also can and are seeing more people move through the system and meet that high standard, and we're requesting the budget resources to help us continue that path.
I'm going to try to set a good example. We have 43 more seconds. I'd like you to talk about NHTSA incorporating the pedestrian protections into the 5-star safety rating system, and you have 32 seconds. Go for it.
Okay. As concisely as I can, I would observe that we need to begin paying attention to the effect of a vehicle's design, not just for those who are in it, but for those who are around it, especially knowing that the rise in roadway deaths that we've experienced over recent years is driven by pedestrian and cycle fatalities. And so this is now being included in the way NHTSA looks at new vehicles, alongside other measures like our recent AEB rule that we think will really help here.
Perfect. Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I am very passionate about the workforce in aviation. I represent a rural state, a very rural state. So does Senator Collins. And I just see that there's so many young people that don't have the exposure to aviation. I tell the story of Jesse Bowie, my friend that lived in a neighborhood that was close to the airport, very limited opportunities, but he could ride his bicycle to the chain link fence to watch these airplanes land in a little general aviation airport. So I know that kids, he became a pilot, he owned a flight instructing school, and Jesse he became successful, but only because he could ride his bicycle to that chain link fence. But I know that kids all across Mississippi and America could thrive with careers in aviation, including mechanics, pilots, flight attendants, and air traffic controllers, if they were just given the opportunity. So I do have this passion to reach out to students at a young age, from elementary school to high school, so they can learn about the potential that a career in aviation has to change their lives. The FAA has established several grant programs to invest in the future aviation workforce by providing grants to academic institutions and the aviation community. While I appreciate that these investments are being made, what more can FAA do to get more children involved in aviation careers? Because I do have a dream of developing a program that can bring kids out to smaller airports. But what can FAA do to get more younger people to strike that chord in them that they may not know is there?
Well, thank you for that question. It's close to my own heart. The imagery that you've described reminds me of my father taking me as a kid to look through the chain link fence at South Bend's Airport the day that Air Force One came to bring President Reagan to visit the University of Notre Dame. And seeing that jumbo jet was one of the reasons I was the kind of kid who grew up with cockpit posters in my bedroom, only to wind up working in a very different way in aviation than what I might have originally imagined back when I was hoping to be a pilot. We know that sparking that early sense of creativity and passion can last a lifetime. And we also know that the country needs to engage more of the talent that's out there. We do have programming that we believe is meaningful. One that I would point to is the Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math, Aviation, and Space Education Program. It's a mouthful, goes by STEM ASVED. Just knowing of your interest in this issue, pulled some numbers and learned that the FAA's held 11 events so far just in Mississippi this fiscal year through that program, but would absolutely welcome more ways in partnership with you and the committee to make sure that we reach more people who have the aptitude and may even already have the passion, but may not have the exposure or the knowledge that they could very well thrive in these careers.
And I know so much of that is on us as states. but I just want to reach out and let you know we will need help from FAA. And, it'll take a lot of folks in the aviation world to make this a reality. But as I continue to work on the program, I'd love to have US DOT and FAA involved to truly amplify the federal government's role in aviation and the opportunities for more young people. I just appreciate your willingness to work with me on that. Talking about other things in Mississippi, Mr. Secretary, the extreme drought conditions that Mississippians experienced in the summer and fall of 2023 left behind almost 13 million dead trees across our entire state. The prolonged drought severely stressed the trees, especially the softwood varieties, and led to major outbreaks of southern pine beetles that is wreaking havoc on our timber harvesters, communities, and landowners. Many of these trees stand along right-of-ways maintained by the State Department of Transportation. And driving up and down the state, you just see them everywhere. It's something like I've never seen. But dead and dying trees throughout our Pine Belt region and the entire state have fallen onto roadways, posing serious safety hazards and forcing Mississippi DOT to expend limited highway maintenance resources on the cleanup. But we have the obvious risk of the traveling public, but I understand that these activities may not be a great fit under the Federal Highway Administration's Emergency Relief Program, in part because they're largely preventive in nature. Still, the fact remains that this is an emergency and Mississippi MDOT needs relief because we certainly didn't expect a drought to cause trees to be on our highways. Are you aware of any existing U.S. DOT programs that Mississippi DOT can utilize, and can I get your commitment to work with these to support these critical safety efforts?
I certainly am committed to working with you to find eligibilities and programs where this may apply, including potentially discretionary grants headed to Mississippi. I'll ask my team to follow up and see where we can be helpful there.
Thank you. I truly appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Coons.
Thank you, Chair Schatz, Ranking Member Hyde-Smith, and thank you very much, Secretary Buttigieg, for your leadership of the department in this difficult and important time. You have led admirably investment in our critical transportation infrastructure across every mode of transportation. And in my view, we have to continue important bipartisan work to fund DOT programs. I think it was a real accomplishment that this subcommittee and the full committee managed to get a strong bipartisan vote for THUD out of the Senate, ultimately, after a long and difficult process, to the President's desk, avoiding a continuing resolution, especially in this area, to promote safety, to promote jobs, to promote quality of life, I think is something that's valuable to all of us, and I look forward to working with the chair and ranking to that end. In Delaware, since the last time you testified in front of this committee, we've gotten a $50 million investment in the Port of Wilmington and a more positive path forward just in time, because frankly, when the tragic accident with the Francis Scott Key Bridge happened, we saw a doubling of the ship traffic to the under-resourced Port of Wilmington. We're also halfway through building a safety, a sort of defensive perimeter around the Delaware Memorial Bridge, which began more than a year ago through a build grant, a $23 million build grant. It's a $90 million project. But this is a very old bridge, and it carries there's a huge amount of ship traffic that goes up the Delaware River to Philadelphia, and they are now halfway through building piers that would essentially prevent a similar accident from happening to a similarly important bridge as the Francis Scott Key Bridge. So thank you for your forward-looking investment in that. We also received modest grants for expansion at the Wilmington Airport, one of America's smallest and least utilized commercial airports, but it's strengthening commercial service in Delaware, something we didn't have for the vast majority of my life, and $15 million for a climate-resilient bridge in an area of our state that floods out repeatedly and has flooded out many times in my lifetime. Two quick things, if I could. Amtrak funding is very important to me, to many of us. Without Amtrak, I wouldn't be able to commute home. 40% of Amtrak ridership is in the Northeast Corridor. This year, we should get back to pre-pandemic ridership levels or even exceed it. And the IAJA made a generational investment in trying to finally get the state of good repair moving in a positive way. And I think Congress needs to continue to keep the promises made in that bipartisan bill. The President's request does increase Amtrak funding by $100 million. I appreciate that, but I intend to send you a letter endorsing Amtrak's budget request. It's $1.2 billion. In the President's budget request, it's $1.6 billion in Amtrak's request for the Northeast Corridor. That's because of the critical role of the state of good repair and ongoing investments. I also will be commending to you the absolutely critical role that the partnership with states in terms of sustaining the Northeast Corridor makes. I'd be interested in your response to what you see as the needed level of investment to keep Amtrak expanding nationally. I think it is wonderful that the Bright Line is now going to connect Las Vegas and Los Angeles, and I agree with you, these are great, high-skilled, high-wage jobs. But I think we also need to continue to invest in the backbone of Amtrak, which is the Northeast Corridor.
Thank you, and completely agree that it is so important to support Amtrak's operations on the Northeast Corridor, the most heavily used passenger rail corridor in the United States. And the investment that we're proposing reflects both the return to ridership and the interest in Amtrak, and the need and the fact that costs have grown. In addition, overall, including the Northeast Corridor commitment you mentioned, there's $2.5 billion requested in the President's budget in addition to the advanced appropriations. And that really is needed if you look at the costs that Amtrak faces and the fact that we are still in the middle or even early part of the journey of making up for the disinvestment that we have inherited when it comes to Amtrak's capital needs. Like you, I've been encouraged to see ridership return. The last figures I saw them return in fiscal 23 to 87% and 97% of pre-COVID actuals, 87% ridership, 97% revenue. So demand is back, ridership is back. We got to prepare them for the future.
Before I run out of time, I'll just emphasize what Senator Hyde-Smith was saying about careers in transportation. Thank you for coming to visit the Amtrak maintenance shops in Bear. Amtrak has employed many men and women in Delaware for a long time. I'm very interested in the mechanical apprentice program that Amtrak has launched, and I'd be interested in anything I can do to help you in sustaining the skilled workforce, without which we can't have the passenger rail of the future. So I commend you for launching that, and I look forward to working with you on that.
Senator Collins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and Vice Chair Hyde-Smith as well. Welcome, Secretary Buttigieg. I want to talk to you about the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge because it brought to light some serious potential vulnerabilities of other bridges that were built prior to the regulations requiring the use of barriers to protect pillars. Now, it's my understanding that as far back as the 1970s, the National Transportation Safety Board recommended studying which existing bridges had inadequate structural pier protection. So we clearly need to have a better understanding of how many other bridges there are out there that could be subjected to the same sort of catastrophic collapse. What has your department been doing to identify these bridges in the light of the Baltimore Bridge collapse? And do you have a comprehensive list?
Thank you, and we are very focused on this. As you note, there has been attention to this for decades, particularly after a similarly catastrophic bridge impact in 1980 in Florida, which gave rise to the AASHTO standards, which federal regulations pay attention to. They require that new bridge construction projects consider the need for and the design of pier protection. I do want to take care to preface anything else I say by acknowledging that the NTSB operates independently from us. They are, of course, independently assessing the causes of this incident. And it is too soon to know whether any bridge design currently known could have withstood a direct impact of the 248 million pounds that went into that pier. But bridges have increasingly been designed with what are called dolphins, fenders, or islands around their supports in order to mitigate the impact of a potential collision. I think that even as NTSB continues their work, we will be able to continue our dialogue with AASHTO on the standards that they have. While there is not an inventory of bridges that is scoped for analysis based on what size vessel impact at what speed each of them might be able to withstand, I think we do need to assess where the most critical points are, where we would prioritize investment in the resilience of the legacy infrastructure that we have. Much as we've made investments, for example, in the seismic resilience of some bridges through the Bridge Investment or PROTECT programs.
Thank you. I want to thank the Department and Merit specifically for working closely with Maine Maritime Academy to reach a cooperative funding agreement for their pier infrastructure improvements. I will tell you that Maine Maritime recently received bids that were far higher than anticipated. That's not uncommon in any kind of construction project, as we see the impact of escalating costs of materials, specialized labor, and other inflationary pressures. And we continue to provide sufficient funding to satisfy the federal cost share requirements. But I am asking for your commitment to continue working with Maine Maritime Academy and my staff to ensure that these shoreside infrastructure improvements can, in fact, accommodate the new training vessels for which the committee has appropriated funds, and that will very shortly, they're under construction now, they will shortly start rolling out.
Thank you. We are excited about these new vessels. We understand they have their own infrastructure needs. And yes, you have our commitment to work with your office and with the Academy to help them prepare.
Thank you. And finally, just a general comment, since I have 18 seconds. And that is, I just want to express my concern about the budget cutting funding for programs that receive funding from the landmark infrastructure bill. When we wrote that law, we made very clear that it was to be supplemental and it was not to be used to substitute for the funding for these programs in the president's budget. But it seems like for the second year in a row, that's exactly what is happening. And that really concerns me because this funding is finite. It's going to end. It was intended to help our country catch up on a lot of delayed maintenance and to improve the infrastructure, to expand broadband, lots of purposes. It was not intended to be a substitute for the regular funding. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Collins. Senator Durbin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Mr. Secretary. A little over 30 years ago, I introduced a bill in the House of Representatives that banned smoking on airplanes. I was sensitive to the environment in the airplanes, the safety of it, public health, and the like, and thought the flying experience would be improved if smoking was removed, and it was. I'd like to address another issue about the quality of the experience in the airplanes today. After you're in your seat and have your belt fastened and you're on your underway, there's an announcement that usually comes around in most airplanes, not about just critical safety issues, but incredible credit card and frequent flyer opportunities. It's almost like the farmhand force-feeding a goose on his road to foie gras, the information that is jammed on you, and then the flight attendants walk up and down the aisles and pass out these cards for applications for their branded credit cards. They stand at the door as you leave the aircraft. It's a heavy sell. It's a hard sell. And you ask yourself, why? Why are they spending so much time doing it? I think you know the answer. Because major airlines make more money off their branded credit cards in your pocket than they do off their aviation operations. turns out those big airlines are actually credit card companies that happen to own a few airplanes. So the question I have for you is, who polices the ranks when it comes to these frequent flyer programs? There's a lot of expectation and a lot of investment in those programs by millions of Americans. I know that you've initiated, through the administration, an interest in this field. Can you tell us more?
Yes, thank you. While we are, of course, not a banking regulator, we are an airline regulator. And as those business lines get blurred, we're recognizing that our responsibility to protect passengers may well come into play. We share your concerns about the rights of passengers who count on these or are told about these rewards programs. DOT has launched a review of our U.S. airline reward programs to determine if there are any unfair and deceptive practices, and will take enforcement action if appropriate. That includes analyzing consumer complaints and meeting with airlines, and we're considering soliciting further information. The other thing I would mention, having noted the boundaries of our lane, is that we're coordinating with CFPB, recognizing that there is a mutual concern here. In fact, we plan to convene a joint hearing with CFPB on May 9th with industry representatives, labor leaders, and consumer advocates to talk about competition issues and challenges that consumers are experiencing with some of these airline and credit card reward programs.
I'm glad you're doing that. And I understand you have a jurisdiction that isn't exactly consumer protection, but this is really an entity that's become so important to so many families across America. We have troubling reports that airlines are devaluing points, making it harder for consumers to achieve promised rewards. And at certain times, the cost of purchasing points from airlines' websites may be 3 times the value of the points at redemption. The list goes on and on. There is no policing the ranks of these airline credit card companies when it comes to this benefit. I have a minute and a half, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention location, location, location. I'm glad you led off your statement on rail service with Chicago, Illinois. You can understand my interest in that. I hope that we can find a way to finally make an investment that will dramatically change the performance of railroads across the United States dependent on efficiency at Chicago. We've had some horror stories in the past. We want to get those behind us. What is your thinking on that?
We certainly believe that there is enormous opportunity for investments to continue to yield improvements, and we know how important that is to your region. Welcome further discretionary grant applications in that regard that would be helpful, and I know our personnel have been engaging with teams from the region to discuss this too.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Chair Durbin. Senator Kennedy.
Mr. Secretary, I hope you'll hear the pleas from our chair to help the people of Maui. We've been through that in Louisiana. Frankly, I'm disappointed that the administration hasn't done more. I'm not laying that at your feet, but the people of Maui right now need more than anything else hope. And without a place to live, there is no hope. How those babies? How your babies doing?
Thanks for asking. They have figured out how to get out of their beds, which means they now control when we get up instead of the other way around. But they're healthy and happy.
Well, they'll be teenagers before you know it. You'll think that aliens have come down and abducted your beautiful kids and replaced them with terrorists, but you'll get through it. So I want to ask you about, I know I sound like a broken record, the National Center of Excellence for Liquefied Natural Gas Safety, a subject that I know you're familiar with, Mr. Secretary. We're trying to get this built. It's frustrating, of course. It's not altogether your fault. Some days it seems like it takes longer than medical school to get something done around here. But I'd like to ask you where we are. Congress has spoken explicitly. We want this project built. We've appropriated money. It's supposed to be in Louisiana. The people of Louisiana and the universities there have gotten together. They want to put the, as do I, they want to put the center at McNeese. Other universities will be involved. How do we get this done?
Thank you. That's certainly the path that we're on. I know we've been engaging your staff, and with your engagement of PHMSA, I believe that we are on the path to advance. One thing I would note is that we've taken to heart your observation that the facility that is there now at McNeese State creates an opportunity to leverage what we're seeking to do with those taxpayer dollars that are entrusted to us. So what I can tell you is that we have directed the GSA to provide options in Lake Charles for that LNG Center of Excellence. Of course, we need to make sure that we follow the procurement process, and we need to make sure that there are adequate resources coming in from the center, and we're working with you on that. But certainly recognize the importance and the potential of this facility and the value that it could bring, making sure that we have the safest and most environmentally responsible LNG processes in the world.
So the LNG project is going to be placed in Louisiana, is that right?
Yes.
And within Louisiana, it's going to be placed in Lake Charles, is that right?
That's what we've directed GSA to do, is find sites in Lake Charles that would meet the mission. And again, part of the rationale for that, as you've noted, is that existing center, that academic center, being able to benefit from that co-location. So pending the procurement process, appropriations, and all that, that's the direction that we're headed in.
And you're working with McNeese State University and our other universities, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. In the 1 minute I have left, I'd like your opinion on something. I'm worried about Boeing, not just from a commercial perspective, from a national security perspective. I'd like your thoughts on that.
Well, the importance of Boeing in economic terms and in strategic terms can't be overstated, given the role that they play in American industry, in aerospace, and in not just the regional economy, but really the U.S. economy. I take care to focus on the safety dimension above all else, and certainly as regards the FAA's equities here, it is and can only be strictly about safety. But I also believe that getting the safety picture right, making sure they address their quality control issues and any cultural issues in terms of prioritizing quality and safety, will in turn redound to the benefit of the economic and strategic importance of a firm that large with that important of a role.
Well, we're not just competing against, we meaning Boeing, against Airbus. We're competing against countries now, other countries. I appreciate your candor on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your gracious hospitality here and letting me go, and Senator Murphy and Senator Van Hollen. I'm simultaneously chairing the Armed Services Committee. Mr. Secretary, we are all aware nationally of the collapse of the bridge in Baltimore, which was a horrendous impact on that city, and we're supporting our colleagues in doing everything we can to get it up and running. But you know, since you visited, we had something similar in Providence, where the major bridge that connects the east and west sides of the metropolitan area had to be closed, at least the west lanes. As a result, and you've seen it, our business community, our traffic, our commuting, where young people might be going to school or not going to school, the ability to get from your home to your hospital appointment has been completely disrupted. It appears that the replacement of the bridge will cost about $360 million. That's way beyond the capacity and way beyond our federal highway allocation. So I would ask you for your help to get us some emergency relief, at least make us eligible for that, and your comments would be appreciated.
Thank you. I'm, of course, very conscious of the importance of this bridge, especially after walking it at your invitation in Rhode Island and sitting with the mayor of East Providence, understanding the impact, not just to those who count on it every day, but to small businesses and the communities on both sides. So our Federal Highway Administration will continue actively working with the Rhode Island DOT to provide whatever support that we can. That's included technical support and assistance in two main areas. First, traffic management and operations to deal with the disruption, and secondly, involvement in supporting RIDOT analyzing the current structure and developing the RFP for the replacement structure, which I should note was just issued on April 29th. While we have not been able to determine that there would be eligibilities for the ER program as it stands, we do see how federal aid formula funding and discretionary funding could be helpful here. And we're also working closely with RIDOT on identifying avenues and opportunities there. Again, want to be a resource in any way that we can to help those communities get back to normal and get that bridge into the state that it needs to be.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And let me particularly thank you for coming up to Rhode Island, and also the Director of the Federal Highway Administration. We appreciate very much your personal involvement. And it might require legislative language to get Rhode Island on the list, and so we will work to try to do that. One other aspect of transportation is transit. Public transit is facing a fiscal cliff, as you know. The pandemic-era flexible transit operating funding expired. That was helping them make it through the crisis. And then ridership levels have not returned to the pre-pandemic levels. And so how is DOT trying to help these public transit agencies continue to function?
Thank you. We continue to be concerned about this. Beginning in fiscal year 2025, several large urban areas are expected to face an operating shortfall, and allowing those systems to decline would imperil our economy. Not only are there 370,000 direct jobs in play, but the latest data I have on usage in the U.S. shows that even in 2022, at those diminished post-COVID levels, there were 6 billion trips taken on public transit. That's part of why our fiscal 25 budget request for FTA proposes to allow urbanized area formula funds and flex funds transferred from federal highways to be used for operating expenses. We think that that additional flexibility will be helpful to transit agencies as they develop longer-term plans. And as we see ridership, though it certainly has not stabilized to pre-COVID patterns, we do see it increasing return, and so that we know that if reliability and frequency can be sustained, we can expect to see continued use and continued revenue that comes with that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. And as you know, transit is one of the principal ways in which low-income families get to work and get to school and get through life. So anything we do, I think, would be very helpful. And thank you for your distinguished service. Thank you.
Thank you, likewise.
Senator Capito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Hyde-Smith. Nice to be here. It's good to see you, Mr. Secretary. In March 28th, with Senator Lujan, we sent a letter to you regarding the NHTSA's Advanced Impaired Driving Prevention Technology rulemaking. Safety on the roads, especially in the windy and mountainous roads of my state, scattered across West Virginia, is a top priority for me, as it is, I'm sure, for you. I'm eager to see these promising technologies in new cars starting in 2026, as the IIJA has required. I understand that the comments received have been robust, and I hope that this is a top priority for NHTSA, as this action will save thousands of lives and make roadways safer. The NTSB's comments note that NHTSA is over a decade behind on these technologies, and automakers note that adding these measures could add to increased costs and consumer backlash. How are you balancing these competing comments, and do you anticipate that such a wide swath of comments could delay the final rule before it's finalized in 2026?
Well,
What's the status of that?
Thank you for your attention to a very important safety issue. Each year, we estimate about a third of all roadway fatalities are related to impaired driving, which is why NHTSA has been energetic in working to comply with the rulemaking provided for in the infrastructure law. The comment period closed on March 5th of this year. As you noted, the comments were robust. Just to put some specificity to that, there were about 18,000 comments that were received. So NHTSA is reviewing those. Of course, that's both the right thing to do and legally required of us. And we do need to make sure that we balance all of the different concerns that are in play, but do it in a way that, at the end of the day, meets our safety mission. So they will continue to work through those comments, and every intention and expectation is of a prompt rulemaking here. Of course, we also need to make sure there's good understanding of how the technologies will be put into play in practice, knowing that it's one thing to have a technology available or prototyped, another to mandate it across the U.S.
So do you anticipate it being in on time in 2026?
I haven't received a definitive timeline for NHTSA, I think, because they're still grappling with the substance of the comments that have come in, but that'll certainly be our aim.
Okay. Well, I'm going to sound like Senator Kennedy because I am a broken record on my issues as well, and this is one federal decision. We put that in the IIJA, and one of the key components is the 2-year goal for completing the environmental review process. I've been told that these provisions have been implemented. In March, my staff received a list of the Federal Highway Administration of one federal decision projects that are currently underway. There are 8 projects on that list. Hard to believe there's only 8, but there's 8 on there. Of these, 6 are listed as currently extended or delayed and are expected to have an extension or a delay in the future. 2 remaining projects had notices of intent issued in February, and their schedules have not been posted on the dashboard. Almost all of these projects have missed or are expecting to miss their 2-year goal. I find this very frustrating. The point of this is to move projects, not just to get the projects done, but it saves money. You get more projects done if you can do it in a timely fashion. Will you commit to making the relevant staff at the department available to brief my staff on the challenges facing each of these projects and what the agency is doing to address these?
Yes, we'd be happy to engage with you on that. I can assure you nobody's more impatient about getting projects done than...
What do you attribute the delays to?
Each project has, of course, its own characteristics, but we can only certify that permitting has been met if it's actually true. So a lot of it is a back and forth with the state. But I've directed our team to accept a kind of moral, if not legal, responsibility for how the states are doing, to be side by side with them.
Well, but it's not really just meant for the states. It's meant for all of the federal agencies to be cooperating and moving into a one federal decision. What kind of accountability are you asking for? EPA, Corps of Engineers, Fish and Wildlife?
Yeah, so that's part of why we have the kind of interagency partnerships that were stood up through the White House's leadership on implementing the bill. And I think that that's reflected in the fact that, for example, every schedule posted on the dashboard for an EIS that has been initiated since the Fiscal Responsibility Act passed is shorter than 2 years, compliant with statute in that regard. Obviously, we have some EISs that were initiated as early as a decade ago, so those have gone through a lot before we even arrived at this. But when it comes to something we can do, for example, the provisions that you put forward that made it possible for us to adopt a categorical exclusion, working with DOE so that something didn't go into that more elaborate process, that can help us on the front end.
Are you using that provision?
Yes, I believe that's...
Could we have follow-up on that?
that?
Which ones are, could we have the follow-up on that?
Yeah, we'll try to get you a sense of how that's coming to play in the EV projects.
Yes. I do have another question on project grant agreements. They're not getting out the door. They're delayed as well, and I'm very frustrated by that, but I'll submit this for the record. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before I move to Senator Murphy, Senator Capito, we'll if you'll permit us, have some of our staff participate in that briefing, just so we're tracking everything.
Yeah, that'd be
on
great.
one federal decision.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you, Mr. Secretary. First, let me note a emergency situation in Connecticut that you, I think, have already been briefed on this morning. There was a major tanker fire that erupted on Interstate 95 near exit 15, the Fairfield Avenue overpass in Norwalk. No major injuries reported, but 95 right now is closed down and may be closed down for days, depending on how fast we are able to make that bridge structurally sound and understand the extent of the fuel leakage. Early estimates are that there are 8,500 gallons of fuel that have leaked from this tanker, and we've got to make sure that the surrounding communities and watershed are safe. And I know you've already put out a statement on this, but I just wanted to get your commitment that you'll be working all throughout the day, personally and through your staff, to make sure that we assess the damage, we get crews out there, and we get the highway and the overpass open as safe as it is possible for commuters and residents.
Absolutely. I spoke to Governor Lamont earlier this morning, and the Federal Highway Administrator is tracking this personally. We'll get PHMSA involved if appropriate, given any spillage that might be in play. And we'll do everything we can to help everybody get back to normal there. We know, and of course have been reminded through experience, just how important a smooth and normal ride on I-95 can be.
Yeah, good. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Wanted to stay in that part of my state for a second. In Stamford, Connecticut, the average income is about $47,000 a year. Not enough, but you can find a way to get by. Just a couple miles up the road in Bridgeport, Connecticut, the average income is $29,000 a year, just simply not enough to get by in a state with a relatively high cost of living like Connecticut. There are a multiplicity of reasons for those differences, but the primary one is distance from New York City, which is the driving economic engine for Fairfield County. It is obviously so maddening that Bridgeport sits only 70 miles away from New York, but still requires an hour and 40-minute train ride to get into the city. There is no reason in 2024 that that should be the case. The great news is that through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, we are finally delivering some serious money to allow us to do the bridge repairs, track additions, and general upgrades to be able to get 140 down to maybe 125 in the next 10 years. But as you know, and Senator Coons has already asked you about Amtrak funding, once this big chunk of bipartisan infrastructure money runs out, we're going to be scrambling as a committee to fill in the gaps. And I guess it is concerning to me to continue to look at accounts like the Fed-State Partnership, like CRISI, that are continuing to be underfunded vis-a-vis where they were in 2022 or 2023. And I just want to make sure that we are working with you to make sure that those numbers get back up at the very least to their high water marks over the last 10 years and hopefully far beyond, so that we don't have this interruption in momentum for the projects that we're undergoing to try to help a community like Bridgeport once the bipartisan infrastructure dollars expire.
Thank you, and certainly agree. People experience distance not in terms of miles, but in terms of minutes. And we know that we can do something about that by finally tackling the backlog in terms of state of good repair and accelerating things on the Northeast Corridor. That's what we're going after with all of the improvements taking place funded by the federal-state partnership. And we think CRISI plays a role here, too. Of course, the $250 million requested here sits on top of the advance appropriation for a total of about $1.2 billion. But the Fiscal Responsibility Act, of course, has required us to make challenging choices in terms of making it all add up. As you can imagine, the only person more enthusiastic than I thought I would be the most enthusiastic about passenger rail is the president. And you can certainly count on this administration to be highly committed to improving travel times and reliability on the Northeast Corridor and any passenger rail corridor in the U.S.
Well, and listen, what we had hoped to see with this big commitment of federal dollars is that states would step up and make their own commitments. Connecticut has done that. The governor's Time for Connecticut plan is all about matching the federal investment with significant state investment to ultimately get a 25-minute change in travel time on the Metro North line from New Haven to New York, which would continue to transform and grow New Haven. Even more critical, as I mentioned, for even lower income communities like Bridgeport. So grateful for your recognition that we've got to have a plan to get these accounts back up to the proper levels so that we keep that really important momentum going. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Senator Hoeven.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. Appreciate you holding this hearing today, and thank you, Secretary, for being with us. One of the things in our state that we've really pushed to develop is unmanned aviation, UAS systems. And in the FAA reauthorization bill, which we're working on right now and hopefully will pass through the Senate here by the first part of next week and have it sent over to the House, where, again, hopefully it'll be passed expeditiously because the current authorization expires May 10th. One of the things in there is testing for the UAS test sites. Well, let me step back. One of the provisions provides that you can establish 2 more UAS test sites, right? And we actually went in and modified that language because there was a requirement that you establish more test sites. And the ones that we have now, one of which is in our state, are doing an incredible job. And I think that we need to be careful that we're not just adding test sites to add test sites, right? And so I want to hear, and so we actually put in there, we changed that language to may establish up to 2 more. So we both limited it and we put in may establish. So again, we're getting, you know, really what we need. We're not just establishing test sites to establish more test sites. Please tell me how you intend to approach that.
Thanks. So yeah, first of all, we're very cognizant of the value added by the test site that you've described. Our total budget request here for UAS is $149 million, and a big part of that is critical research on standards and advanced concepts and applications, but also the management and operations of the Center of Excellence. There are 7 FAA-designated UAS test sites, and the objective of that program is to provide that kind of verification of safety for the different kinds of UAS applications that are going to have to be integrated into the NAS. Certainly, whatever Congress prescribes in terms of flexibility and in terms of how many sites are kind of a floor or a ceiling, FAA will work with you and with our existing test sites to make sure we're optimizing what we have.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. You were ready for that one, I could tell. And that's good, because I'm pretty sure in our PROPS bill, we'll have some report language that goes right to that very point. So that sounds like the right kind of working relationship. I appreciate that. Another example is restrictions that it can only support unmanned aircraft. Well, for folks that have been in this business for 20 years like we have, you have to be able to test sensors. You may have to actually put those on manned aircraft, you follow me? So you've got to have some flexibility in these. It's one thing to sit here and prescribe stuff you know nothing about. It's another thing to work with the experts. And that's what I'm trying to get across. There's a lot of expertise. We first established our UAS Center of Excellence back in 2005. So that's almost 20 years ago. Other folks are just showing up to the party. And we want to make sure you're relying on the expertise that you have. And frankly, the FAA Administrator Whitaker, who's kind of this second time around because he was in the prior administration, which is great. We're used to working with him, and we're pleased he's in that position. I think he knows this stuff, so you know your strong support for his efforts there would be appreciated.
Thank you.
The other thing along those lines is at the University of North Dakota, we have a pilot training school. They probably have a fleet of more than 100 aircraft. Right now, everybody has to go to Oklahoma City to be an air traffic controller and finish out their education there, which is a real bottleneck. So there's a new initiative that Administrator Whitaker has undertaken. It's called the Air Traffic Collegiate Training Initiative to actually allow schools with the expertise like the University of North Dakota to take these individuals all the way to the point where they can take the test, thereby relieving that bottleneck at a time when we need more air traffic controllers. So I want to ask for your opinion on that and obviously your support for it.
Thank you. Yes, at a time when we need more air traffic controllers, we need more throughput in terms of the hiring. We know that means being imaginative about force multipliers that can help us add to the capacity that we have at our FAA Academy. And let me emphasize, our Academy is an extraordinary resource. It's something we're very proud of. They're doing a great job. The ATCTI program that you referenced will make it possible for us to add to that through colleges and universities that have deep expertise in this area, and appreciate the University of North Dakota's interested in participating. To be clear, as you acknowledged, graduates of that program still need to pass the air traffic skills assessment exam. We are not going to increase throughput by decreasing standards, but this does provide another avenue to do that. The applications opened on April 1st. We'll keep them open on a rolling basis, and FAA has already been able to get some guidance out on criteria and coursework, but of course we'll need to continue to be very closely working in partnership with these institutions to deliver on the promise of that idea.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, just really quickly here, I know I'm used my time, but very quick. Associate Administrator for Airports, Shanetta Griffin, has been helping us with the Fargo Airport. It's a fantastic project, serves at least 2 states, maybe 3. I would ask for your support for her efforts. She's been right on target, so I ask for your support there. And also, we received a grant on 4-laning Highway 85, which the goal is to run all the way from Mexico to Canada, and I ask for your support on that project as well.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence.
It's a little rare when an individual civil servant is called out by name in such a positive way, so I just love it. And before I recognize Senator Van Hollen, I just wanted to speak for the committee on a bipartisan basis and the staff to say, whatever you need, we're here. Senator Van Hollen.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senator Schatz, and I know that we're working together on emergency relief to various forms of disaster, and I do want to start by thanking you, Mr. Secretary, and President Biden for your immediate and continued support for the city of Baltimore and the state of Maryland in the aftermath of the awful tragedy, the collapse of the Key Bridge. You were there that day. You called folks at 3 a.m. in the morning, and I do want to just thank you for being there time and time again, and not just delivering important words of support, but delivering real help and results. And that is true of you and the President of the United States. So thank you for that. This morning, we just heard news that we have recovered a 5th body. 6 individuals lost their lives in that collapse. And as you know, our priority has been to support their families, and we continue to do so. The other priority, and you've spoken to this eloquently, is opening the Port of Baltimore fully. And again, thank you for all your efforts there. The Army Corps of Engineers has done amazing work. We already cleared one 35-foot channel that allows 80% of the port's business to be restored. And we're hoping by the end of this month to be able to clear the 50-foot channel and resume all operations at the Port of Baltimore. And as you said, and the chairman recognized, this is a disaster that had national implications. And that is why we also appreciate the fact that the president has said from day one that we, the federal government, will help Maryland and Baltimore in rebuilding the bridge and support 100% of the costs, recognizing that any funds recovered from lawsuits for wrongdoing will be recouped by federal taxpayers. So I want to thank you and the president for working quickly to make sure that Maryland entered the emergency relief program, which covers 90% of the costs. Also for your emergency help through immediate funds to deal with traffic mitigation. But as you know, because we worked with you and the administration, Senator Cardin and I and our whole delegation on a bipartisan basis have introduced legislation to meet the president's pledge to provide 100% funding in the wake of this disaster. And I just want to get your understanding as to your full support for that legislation.
Thank you. Yes, as you know, the president committed both in person and in public to making sure that the federal government fully supports the costs of rebuilding. That means 100%, and we welcome your leadership and that of the Maryland delegation in working to get the statutory authorities that would be necessary to take us from that 90% to that 100%.
Thank you. Let me just turn to, I want to touch on 2 other issues. Well, before I go there, I do want to say to the chairman, you know, our hope, the hope of the Maryland delegation is to expedite the passage of that legislation just as soon as possible. And if it's not on the FAA bill, it's got to be the next, you know, matter of business, and including some of the things the chairman and I have worked on. So another issue that is immediately before us with respect to the FAA are these 5 additional slots that some members have pushed for DCA. I just want you to reaffirm what you stated the other day, which is you visited DCA. You understand that that one runway is the hardest working runway in the national airspace You went on to say, we would be concerned about the pressure that could be put on the system from those additional slots. Mr. Secretary, are you still concerned today about the additional pressure that would put on?
Yes, as I said the other day, we have to prioritize safety, obviously, in every decision that is made, which means that if there is any kind of condition where the tower is overburdened, the only alternative to allowing an unsafe condition, which the FAA will never do, is a likelihood of delays or some kind of flow process that could impact travelers.
Well, I appreciate that, and we do. Safety has to be paramount. A lot of the FAA bill is focused on safety, so it would be unacceptable to have a bill designed to focus on safety that compromises safety at DCA. Mr. Chairman, if I could just in closing, again, I want to thank the Secretary for all the work in rebuilding after the bridge collapse. Thank you also for your work as we look to the future of Baltimore City, both with the Red Line as well as our reconnecting communities in West Baltimore, which is the reason the reconnecting communities provision was in the infrastructure and modernization bill. It's to deal with the highway to nowhere, which divided a black community in West Baltimore. You've been there, you've seen it yourself, and so we just look forward to our continued work together on that.
Likewise, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Manchin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Secretary, thank you for being here, and thank you for always connecting, corresponding, and getting back with us on different concerns we might have together. I appreciate very much the attention from your office and yourself especially. The Biden administration would like to say that bipartisan infrastructure law provided $7.5 billion to build out a network of EV chargers in this country, but that's really not accurate. And I wanted to go over why, because I know we wrote the bill the way we did. Your department's responsible for allocating 2.5 of that funding through the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Grant Program to strategically deploy publicly accessible refueling infrastructure along designated corridors and other accessible locations. While EV charging is eligible for this funding, it is not the only technology that there is. We were very clear in the bill about that. Hydrogen, propane, and natural gas fueling infrastructure are also eligible, which is why I include an amendment in the Senate's markup of the fiscal year 24 transportation appropriation bill last year that directs your department to give fair and full consideration to each eligible technology and not to restrict awards to just EV charging infrastructure. Unfortunately, of the 47 awards provided under the program so far, all but four, 43 of them, and all but four have been exclusively, 43 of them for EV charging. So I just get your assurance that you are looking or understanding how the bill was written and the purpose of the bill. And if you're trying to correct that or looking at the inequality of how this distribution is going.
Thank you, and I can assure you that in reviewing applications, the department is always taking care to make sure that it conforms to statute, including those that creates those eligibilities for these chargers. I think the bulk of the successful grant applications have been electric for the same reason that the bulk of private sector investment in alternative fuel for light-duty vehicles has been on the electric vehicle charging, but any program from the Alternative Fuel Corridor Program to CFI that has an inclusive definition where EVs are eligible, but EV charging is eligible, but not the only thing that's eligible, we will apply that faithfully and judge every application based on its merits and its conformity to statute.
The thing I mean, just if your people would consider in rural areas where you might have challenges from the grid and electrical capacity and things of that sort, and the larger trucks, they're not going that direction. They're looking at hydrogen for long hauling. They got the horsepower, they got the ability to do it, and they're very clean. But we never have, and we're having a hard time getting hydrogen going because I've got to be honest with you, the administration's a little bit lackluster on how we make hydrogen and things of this sort. But I can tell you it's the fuel of the future as far as the heavy trains, even planes, but definitely trucks. And fueling stations in remote areas, Montana, Wyoming, all the west, and areas like we have mountainous things of that, electric just doesn't do it. So if you could consider the terrain you're dealing with and the locations you're dealing with the alternative fuel sources, It would help tremendously, Mr. Secretary. Also, I'd like to I know you've been very helpful on Corridor H. Corridor H in going through West Virginia. President Johnson, as part of the Appalachian Development Highway System, 1965. We've been trying to connect this since 1965. We're getting close. You all been great. We're almost there. We need your commitment to finish this damn thing. So I hope it's high on your radar screen, and I know you have some tremendous staff that understands West Virginia very well, sitting behind you, that understands it, lives in that part of the state of West Virginia, that understands how desperately we need that. And the I-81 connection would be unbelievable, sir.
Thanks. Of course, we're very mindful of the importance of Corridor H and the entirety of the ADHS, and we'll continue to work on that with the resources and eligibilities that we have.
I know. And then also, the ticket agents. Remember, we've been working on ticket agents. You helped us get it back in West Virginia. We say the New River Train and expand the rail service that keeps the state connected to the rest of the nation. Only thing that we're asking for, the agency was thankful that the agency granted $500,000 to Amtrak this past December. Without that $500,000 dedication that you put towards Amtrak, we would have not kept those systems that we have. What we have right now is we have the Capital Limited, which runs through the Eastern Panhandle, and the Cardinal, which runs from New York City to Chicago, both traversing our southern borders, southern part of our state. The Summit Bechtel National Scout Reserve has been blessed by this, the state capital in Charleston, Marshall University in Huntington. It's truly a lifeline, and people are using the rail more than ever before. We made upgrades into our stations to handle the, truly treat the passengers in a much more friendly atmosphere. So with that, the stakeholders in West Virginia, we're working to restore a 7-day-a-week service on the critical transportation route to my state. If you all would look into that, we would be deeply grateful for that, because I think it justifies it.
Thank you.
I don't know how much you all know about that, but are you finding there's more of an uptick on train traffic?
There's certainly more and more interest and excitement in passenger rails. You know, my boss is all about it, and we're doing everything we can to deliver both restored service and reliability on the service.
How's the high-speed thing? How's the high-speed working? I've been watching that, and I think you're what, California and Nevada, Las Vegas?
Yeah, it was a great day. We were able to break ground on that. They aim to have that train in service by 2028. It would mark the first high-speed rail service in revenue on U.S. soil, and I believe the first time an American passenger buys a ticket, there's no
real
going
quickly,
back.
if I may, Mr. Chairman, on that, Mr. Secretary, I looked at that and I thought, that one route, that one train has a chance to be revenue neutral if you can, revenue making. Do you all see any forecast that it can pay for itself once we have the investment made?
Obviously, we're investing in that capital side, but
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons why you see a private player building that is they believe in the extraordinary revenue potential there. And while every market's different, every line is different, that's one that seems especially well
So
suited.
we're not obligated to maintain it and take care of it and everything as far as after the
No,
capital
we
investment?
made a capital grant of $3 billion and then another loan, but that's really about the capital side. It'll be up to the business to
That's great.
operate it.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Senator Sinema.
Thank you, Chairman Schatz, and thank you, Ranking Member Hyde-Smith, and thank you, Secretary Buttigieg, for being here today. In Arizona, we feel the positive impact of the bipartisan infrastructure law and its historic investment of over $7.7 billion in total funding already. Included in that is $4.7 billion to improve Arizona roads, bridges, public transit system, ports of entry, and airports. Arizona's airports alone have received over $263 million to make desperately needed enhancements and improve service to those who need it most. When I wrote the bipartisan infrastructure law, I was working towards transformative projects, like finally completing the widening of the I-10 between Phoenix and Tucson. That vital roadway moves tens of millions of people and over $40 billion in goods each year. Thanks to the Infra Grant award made possible by the bipartisan infrastructure law, an expanded, safer 3-lane I-10 running through the Gila River Indian community and Pinal County will now be a reality. Arizonans are excited for this project specifically, and we look forward to your continued partnership in implementing all aspects of the bill. You said in your testimony today that safety is DOT's primary mission. I agree. As you know, you contacted me last Friday to let me know that a BNSF railway train derailed along the Arizona-New Mexico border carrying liquefied petroleum gas. 2 of those cars caught fire. This closed Interstate 40 in all directions, halted service on Amtrak Southwest Chief, and prompted a 2-mile evacuation radius. The FRA is the primary investigator, and Arizonans are eager to get more information on the derailment. Unfortunately, details have been hard to come by on the cause or even basic information like the fire's duration or how the FRA has determined potential public health concerns. So could you explain how the FRA process and timeline of the investigation will unfold, including how the cause of the derailment will be determined, and how will the department ensure that lawmakers are fully and timely informed as it develops?
Thank you. As you noted, this incident had our attention from day one. We were in touch at that time, and we have been monitoring it since. In this case, the investigation was affected by the fact that FRA personnel had limited site access while the fire was still burning. And of course, in that first instance, we'll defer to emergency responders working on securing the site, containing the fire, and managing the evacuation before the investigative dimension of things can take priority. My understanding is that NTSB is involved but is in an observer status. We'll confirm that afterwards with your office to make sure that that information is still current. If provided that it is, then FRA will lead the investigation, but also PHMSA may play a role given the fact that LPG was involved. The FRA administrator was there on Monday, and we're going to continue to have as much presence as required to support the community. The original evacuation affected 50 individuals, but that was lifted on Sunday. We'd be happy to follow up and get you any other information that you need, recognizing, of course, that this remains an active investigation right now.
Well, thank you. The 38-car derailment on Friday night occurred on Navajo Nation land, as you're aware. My office was informed about a lack of tribal community notification after the fact. So the DOT's recent notice of proposed rulemaking requires railroads to provide critical information to state-approved first responders within a 10-mile radius. Does that rule intend to cover tribal communities? And if it doesn't, do you have plans to clarify the final rule?
I would certainly expect so. I'll make sure to look into that. I can tell you at our level, I was on the phone with the Navajo Nation president promptly, but if the railroad missed any of its responsibilities for tribal engagement, I would want to know, and I can also tell you our Assistant Secretary for Tribal Affairs will also be conducting a site visit, and I'll make sure that's on his agenda when he's there.
Great. I'd like to follow up on that. As you know, border infrastructure is critical to Arizona and to the country. The San Luis Port of Entry processes over 3 million vehicles and 2.5 million pedestrians annually. The Douglas Commercial Port of Entry will need significant roadway, utility, and infrastructure investment to fulfill its inspection obligations and reach the commercial and industrial potential it has for the surrounding area. So how will DOT prioritize investment to strengthen our economy and increase our border security by utilizing programs like MEGA, Infra, and RAISE grants to support the movement of goods in and through border regions?
Border infrastructure is very important for our economic future, and I think deserves to rate highly in our infrastructure plans and funding. And that's one of the reasons why I think many projects for border infrastructure or border communities have performed well in our discretionary grant programs made possible through the bipartisan infrastructure law. Just to mention some of the highlights, that includes the RAISE grant to the Isleta Port of Entry in El Paso from fiscal year 2022, the Infra 22 grant for Otay Mesa East, the rural grant that benefited an Arizona community along the border, and the Anzalduas Infra grant for Texas. You know, we are looking at extraordinary projected growth in terms of the freight crossings at these borders at a time when there's also, I think, been heightened attention ever since COVID to the fluidity of our supply chains. So I think that this will continue to be a priority, and as we see more and more applications come in, I think border-related applications will continue to compete very effectively.
Thanks. Chairman, with your indulgence, one final question. Thank you. You know, we were very happy to secure a commitment from DOT in the FY24 appropriations law to continue to support construction of the Interstate 11 corridor project. You know how important that is to our state. Can you tell me what the department is doing to aid the planning and development of the I-11?
This is a project I know we've had an opportunity to discuss many times, given the high demand and growth that's taking place along that corridor, and that if you just look at the national picture, it is rare to find any area of comparable population and traffic growth that hasn't had some kind of direct interstate connection. The Tier 1 EIS got its record of decision in November 2021. I know that there are further phases and stages that are taking place, particularly on the Nevada side. Would welcome the opportunity to get more of an update for you in writing, but as I understand it, both the Nevada and Arizona sides are committed to moving forward, and we'll work through any issues or obstacles that come up together.
Thank you, Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Secretary, thank you for coming today to discuss the DOT's budget request. The hearing record will remain open until Thursday, May 9th, to allow members to submit additional questions for the record. This hearing is now adjourned.